Welcome to HOA Reality 365, where every neighborhood hides a story, and every story ends with the truth.
They laughed at my flood wall. 10 minutes later, they were begging for help.
People always assume a flood is just bad luck. I used to believe that too, until I learned that water never lies. It always follows the path people create for it. My name is Jack Walker. I am 40 years old. I spent nearly 18 years serving as a combat engineer in the United States Army. My job was simple: protect people by understanding terrain, water, and structures. When I retired, I wanted peace. No deadlines. No deployments. No emergencies. Just a quiet ranch where I could enjoy every sunrise with my old golden retriever Cooper. That dream brought me to a beautiful piece of land just outside a luxury neighborhood called Silver Creek Estates. The ranch was everything I wanted: rolling green fields, tall oak trees, a crystal clear creek, and enough space that I would never have to hear another neighbor arguing over fences or property lines. Or at least that was what I believed. The first week after moving in, I noticed something unusual. Every afternoon I walked the property with Cooper. Old habits never disappear. Engineers notice details other people ignore. I found old erosion marks near the northern edge of my ranch. Large rocks had shifted. Grass grew differently. Tree roots were exposed. Someone else might have ignored those signs. I couldn't. They told a story. Water had been there before. Not once. Many times. I visited the county engineering office the following morning. The original floodplain maps confirmed my suspicion. Decades earlier, seasonal runoff had crossed this land during major storms. Most people would have accepted the risk. I didn't. Instead, I hired one of the best geotechnical engineers in Colorado. For 2 weeks, we surveyed every inch of the property. Laser measurements, soil testing, drainage calculations, everything. The final report was simple. My ranch was safe. But only if future development uphill respected the natural drainage channels. Unfortunately, Silver Creek Estates had expanded several times over the last 15 years. Every new road, every new driveway, every new rooftop sent more water downhill. The engineer looked at me and smiled. If you were my client, I would build protection now instead of waiting for disaster. That was all I needed to hear. Construction began the following month. But this wasn't just a wall. It was a professionally engineered flood protection system. Reinforced concrete foundations, deep drainage channels, pressure relief outlets, steel reinforced retaining sections. Everything was designed according to county regulations. Every permit was approved. Every inspection passed. Even the county inspector complimented the design. He laughed and said, "I wish more people planned ahead like this." I smiled. Because planning had kept me alive for nearly 2 decades. It could certainly protect a ranch. Construction finished 3 weeks later. The wall blended naturally into the landscape. Strong. Simple. Practical. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, a black luxury SUV stopped outside my entrance. 3 people stepped out. A woman wearing an expensive pink blazer walked toward the gate with absolute confidence. 2 men in business suits followed behind her carrying folders. She never introduced herself. She simply looked at my wall and laughed. Then she said the words that started everything. "That wall is ridiculous." I calmly asked. "Can I help you?" She crossed her arms. "I'm Melissa Carter, president of the Silver Creek Estates HOA. She pointed directly at my flood wall. "That ugly thing destroys the appearance of our community." I quietly looked behind her. "My ranch isn't inside your HOA." She smiled. "It doesn't matter. We'll make sure that wall comes down." I looked at Cooper sitting quietly beside me. Then back at Melissa. For a moment I almost laughed. Because she wasn't looking at a wall. She was looking at 18 years of engineering experience. and she had absolutely no idea what was coming. The morning after Melissa Carter visited my ranch, I expected the argument to be over. Instead, it had only just begun. Less than 24 hours later, I found a bright orange notice attached to my front gate. It was a complaint demanding that I remove my flood wall immediately. The letter claimed the wall was unsafe. It claimed the wall damaged the appearance of the neighborhood. It even claimed it increased flood risks for nearby homes. None of it was true. The strange part was that my ranch was completely outside the HOA. They had no legal authority over my property. Still, they acted as if they owned everything they could see. I folded the letter and placed it inside a folder labeled evidence. Years in the Army had taught me something important. Never throw away your opponent's mistakes. A week later, county inspectors arrived. 2 white trucks parked outside my ranch. Melissa stood behind them wearing another expensive outfit with the same confident smile. She looked at me as if she had already won. The lead inspector introduced himself and explained that several complaints had been filed about my flood wall. I nodded politely. Then I handed him every permit, every engineering drawing, every inspection approval, every soil report, every drainage calculation. The inspector spent nearly 2 hours reviewing everything. He measured the wall. He checked the foundation. He compared every detail with the approved plans. Finally, he smiled. He turned toward Melissa. "The wall is completely legal. There are no violations. You have nothing to remove." For the first time, her smile disappeared. She argued that the wall looked ugly. The inspector simply shrugged. "The county does not regulate personal opinions." He wished me a good day and drove away. Melissa stayed behind. She walked closer to the wall and quietly said, "This isn't over." I answered with a calm smile. "I never thought it was." Over the next month, the complaints kept coming. Anonymous phone calls, emails, more inspection requests, noise complaints, dust complaints, even complaints about my tractor. Every single investigation ended exactly the same way. No violations. No fines. No problems. My ranch remained exactly as it was. One afternoon, my neighbor Tom stopped by. He had lived in the area for nearly 30 years. After looking around, he shook his head. "You know why they hate that wall?" I smiled. "Because it's taller than they wanted." Tom laughed. "No. Because it reminds them they ignored the same problem." He pointed towards Silver Creek Estates. "They were supposed to improve their drainage years ago. They kept delaying it to save money." That sentence stayed in my mind. Save money. As an engineer, I knew exactly what happened when maintenance became optional. Nothing failed immediately. It failed during the worst possible moment. That evening, I opened public county records. The files stretched back nearly 15 years. Board meeting minutes, budget reports, maintenance contracts, stormwater inspection records. The deeper I searched, the more interesting things became. One report caught my attention. It recommended cleaning every storm drain before each rainy season. Another report recommended expanding the neighborhood retention pond. Neither recommendation had been completed. Instead, the board repeatedly voted to postpone the work. Every delay saved money. Every delay increased the risk. I leaned back in my chair and quietly looked toward the neighborhood through my kitchen window. Melissa had spent weeks trying to destroy my flood wall. But she had never bothered to fix the one thing that actually protected her own community. The weather forecast appeared on my computer screen. Meteorologists were predicting the strongest storm system in more than 20 years. Heavy rainfall. Flash flood warnings. Rivers expected to rise. Most people reading that forecast would feel nervous. I felt something very different. Because I already knew exactly what would happen when that much water arrived. I walked outside as the evening sky turned dark. Cooper followed close behind. The wind had already begun to change. Clouds rolled slowly across the mountains. I placed one hand on the concrete wall. Solid. Strong. Exactly as it had been designed. Far across the valley I could see Melissa standing near the entrance of Silver Creek Estates speaking with several board members. They looked relaxed. They laughed together. None of them noticed the black clouds gathering behind them. None of them realized the storm had already begun. And before the next sunrise, their entire neighborhood would learn the difference between saving money and paying the price. The rain started just after midnight. At first it sounded peaceful. Small drops tapped gently against the roof of my cabin. Cooper lifted his head for a moment, then went back to sleep. I stayed awake. Old habits are difficult to forget. Whenever a major storm arrived, I always watched the weather instead of sleeping. By 1 o'clock the rain had become steady. By 2 it was pouring. The wind roared across the valley, shaking the trees and rattling the windows. Lightning flashed every few seconds, turning the night into brief moments of daylight. I poured myself a cup of coffee and walked onto the front porch. Everything around me was moving. The creek was already rising. Water rushed through every natural channel exactly as the engineering models had predicted. Nothing surprised me. That was the difference between guessing and preparing. Around 3 in the morning my weather station sounded an alert. Flash flood emergency. Rainfall totals had already broken local records. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly walked toward the flood wall. Water rushed across the open fields with incredible force. Branches floated past. Large rocks rolled through the current. The sound of rushing water echoed across the valley. Then I watched exactly what I had designed the wall to do. Instead of allowing the floodwater to spread across my ranch, the reinforced wall redirected the flow into the protected drainage channel. Every relief outlet worked perfectly. Pressure stayed balanced. The foundation never moved even an inch. Everything performed exactly as planned. I smiled quietly. Not because I enjoyed storms. Because preparation was working. Then I looked uphill towards Silver Creek Estates. Something immediately caught my attention. Water was no longer flowing into their retention pond. Instead, it was backing up. Street after street began filling with muddy water. Storm drains overflowed like fountains. Water spilled across sidewalks and driveways. Within minutes, the first intersection disappeared beneath muddy brown water. Then another. Then another. I reached for my binoculars. Homeowners were running outside carrying flashlights. Some tried placing sandbags in front of their garages. Others desperately pushed water away with brooms. It made no difference. The water kept rising. Then I saw Melissa Carter. She stood in the middle of the neighborhood wearing a bright yellow raincoat, shouting instructions at everyone around her. People pointed toward flooded streets. Others argued. No one seemed to know what to do. Suddenly, emergency sirens echoed through the valley. Police vehicles arrived first. Fire trucks followed close behind. Then rescue boats. The entire neighborhood had turned into an emergency zone. I quietly stood behind my flood wall watching everything unfold. My ranch remained completely dry. The pasture behind me looked almost untouched. The wall had done exactly what it had been built to do. Across the valley, expensive luxury homes were taking on water. Front doors disappeared beneath the flood. Garages filled within minutes. Luxury SUVs floated slowly down flooded streets. Outdoor furniture drifted through front yards. Children were carried to rescue boats by firefighters. The scene looked like something from a disaster movie. Then something happened that I never expected. Melissa looked directly toward my ranch. Even from hundreds of yards away, I could see the disbelief on her face. She stared at my perfectly protected property, then at her flooded neighborhood, then back at my flood wall. For the first time since we had met, she finally understood. The wall she had called ugly, the wall she had tried to remove, the wall she laughed at, was now the only reason one side of the valley remained safe. Minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered calmly. A nervous voice spoke immediately. Mr. Walker. This is the Silver Creek Estates HOA. We need your help. I looked across the flooded neighborhood one more time, then quietly replied, I'll listen. But deep inside, I already knew this storm was only the beginning. The real disaster would start after the water disappeared. I ended the phone call without making any promises. For weeks the HOA had treated me like the enemy. Now they suddenly needed my help. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in the truth. By sunrise the rain had finally stopped. Dark clouds slowly drifted east as emergency crews continued working throughout Silver Creek Estates. Police blocked every entrance. Firefighters pumped water from flooded homes. Utility crews shut down damaged power lines. News helicopters circled overhead broadcasting live across the state. I poured another cup of coffee and quietly watched from my porch. Cooper sat beside me without making a sound. Around 8 that morning 3 vehicles pulled into my driveway. A county engineer, a flood investigator, and the emergency management director. The lead investigator introduced himself. Mr. Walker, we've been reviewing satellite images. Your ranch stayed almost completely dry. I nodded. That's what the design was supposed to do. He looked toward my flood wall. We'd like to inspect it. Of course. For nearly 2 hours they examined every section. They measured drainage channels, checked expansion joints, inspected relief outlets, compared elevations with digital survey maps. Finally the county engineer smiled. This wall didn't cause the flooding. It prevented it. The emergency director looked toward the flooded neighborhood. Then something else failed. I quietly answered. I think I know what. I walked inside my office and returned carrying a thick folder. Inside were public county records I had downloaded weeks earlier. Maintenance reports, drainage inspections, engineering recommendations, budget meeting minutes. I handed everything to the investigators. The flood investigator slowly turned each page. His expression changed with every document. This can't be right. I pointed toward one report. They were told to clean every major storm drain before every rainy season. Another report. They were told to expand the retention pond. Another document. They postponed it again, and again, and again. The county engineer looked shocked. They ignored every recommendation. I nodded. They saved money, but they increased the risk every single year. By midday, excavation crews began opening storm drains inside the neighborhood. The first grate came off, completely blocked. The second, packed with mud, leaves, and construction debris. The third, even worse. None of them had been properly maintained. Then investigators inspected the neighborhood retention pond. The outlet structure was nearly clogged shut. Years of neglect had reduced its capacity. Instead of safely holding stormwater, the pond overflowed within hours. The water had nowhere to go, so it poured directly into the streets. House after house, garage after garage, front door after front door. The disaster wasn't caused by the storm. It was caused by decisions. Cheap decisions. Avoidable decisions. That afternoon, local television crews arrived at my ranch. One reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. Mr. Walker, how did your property survive while the entire neighborhood flooded? I looked at the camera, then quietly answered. Water follows engineering, not opinions. The interview spread across social media before sunset. Thousands of people watched it. By evening, reporters were no longer asking about my flood wall. They were asking why the HOA ignored years of engineering warnings. Inside Silver Creek Estates, homeowners demanded answers. Board members stopped speaking to reporters. Melissa Carter disappeared from public view. Rumors spread through the neighborhood. Some blamed the storm. Others blamed the county. But the documents told a different story. And documents don't panic. Documents don't lie. Late that evening, Rebecca Lawson called me. One of the best property attorneys in Colorado. I've reviewed everything. She paused. This isn't just negligence. If these records are accurate, the HOA may be financially responsible for every damaged home. I looked once more toward the flooded neighborhood. Lights from emergency vehicles still flashed across the water. Families were carrying ruined furniture onto sidewalks. Children stood quietly beside soaked boxes of belongings. Nobody deserved what had happened. Not even the people who laughed at my wall. But someone had to answer for it. And for the first time, Melissa Carter wasn't controlling the story anymore. The evidence was. 3 months passed before the case finally reached court. By then, Silver Creek Estates looked completely different. Several homes were still under repair. Entire streets had been rebuilt. The retention pond had been drained and surrounded by construction equipment. Every homeowner wanted one answer. Who was responsible? The courtroom was completely full. Residents filled every seat. Reporters stood along the back wall. Television cameras waited outside. Melissa Carter entered with 2 expensive attorneys. She tried to look confident. But confidence disappears when facts become evidence. Rebecca Lawson placed several large boxes beside our table. Inside were engineering reports, drone photographs, maintenance records, county inspection files, budget documents. Everything had been organized perfectly. The judge entered and the courtroom became silent. The hearing began with the HOA's attorney. He claimed the flood had been caused by an historic storm. He argued that no neighborhood could have prevented that amount of rainfall. For a few moments it sounded believable. Then Rebecca stood. She walked toward the judge carrying only one folder. "Your Honor, the storm was extraordinary. But this disaster was completely predictable." She placed the first document onto the evidence screen. A county engineering report from 6 years earlier. The recommendation was simple. Clean every storm drain. Expand the retention pond. Complete maintenance before future development. Rebecca displayed another report. Same recommendation. Another year. Another warning. Another ignored inspection. The judge carefully reviewed every page. Then the county engineer testified. He explained how block storm drains reduced water flow. How neglected maintenance caused pressure to build. How the retention pond lost nearly half its designed capacity. Finally, he looked directly at the judge. "This flood was preventable." The courtroom became silent. Then Rebecca called another witness. The former financial manager of the HOA. He looked nervous as he sat down. She asked one question. "Who decided to postpone the drainage maintenance?" He swallowed slowly. "The board." "Who led those meetings?" He hesitated, then quietly answered. "Melissa Carter." Rebecca displayed the HOA budget. Everyone could clearly see the numbers. The maintenance budget had been reduced year after year. The saved money had been spent elsewhere. Luxury entrance landscaping, decorative fountains, holiday decorations, community events. Everything looked beautiful, except the drainage system hidden beneath the streets. Rebecca turned toward the judge. "They invested in appearance. They ignored safety." Melissa's attorney tried to object. The judge immediately overruled him. Next, the emergency management director testified. He explained that rescue teams had evacuated dozens of families. Several elderly residents required medical assistance. Children had been rescued from flooded homes. Millions of dollars in damage could have been avoided. Then Rebecca surprised everyone. She asked the court to display drone footage taken during the storm. The videos showed my ranch. Dry. Safe. Protected. Then the camera slowly turned towards Silver Creek Estates. Entire streets disappeared beneath muddy water. Cars floated through intersections. Garages filled within minutes. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The judge watched the entire recording without saying a single word. When it ended, he slowly removed his glasses. He looked toward Melissa Carter. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Mrs. Carter, were you aware of these engineering recommendations before the storm?" Melissa remained silent. Her attorney whispered something. Finally, she answered, "Yes." The judge asked another question. "Why were they ignored?" She tried to explain budget limitations. She claimed the board believed the risk was small. The judge interrupted. The reports repeatedly warned this exact disaster could happen. No one spoke. The silence inside the courtroom felt heavier than the storm itself. For the first time since this entire battle began, Melissa Carter had no answer. And everyone in the courtroom knew exactly what the judge was about to do. The courtroom remained silent. No one moved. No one whispered. The judge slowly closed the final evidence folder and looked across the room. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. This court finds that the Silver Creek Estates Homeowners Association knowingly ignored repeated engineering recommendations and failed to maintain critical stormwater infrastructure. He paused for a moment. The flooding was not an unavoidable natural disaster. It was the direct result of negligence. Melissa Carter lowered her head. For the first time since I had met her, she looked completely defeated. The judge continued. The HOA is responsible for all damages caused by its failure to maintain the drainage system. The courtroom erupted with emotion. Some homeowners quietly celebrated. Others looked shocked. Several families simply closed their eyes with relief. The judge raised his hand and the room became quiet again. He ordered the HOA to fully compensate every affected homeowner. He ordered the drainage system to be completely rebuilt under county supervision. He ordered every block storm drain to be replaced. He ordered the retention pond to be expanded according to the original engineering recommendations. The HOA would also pay every legal fee connected to the case. The financial costs reached millions of dollars. But the biggest loss was trust. Within days, homeowners demanded an emergency community meeting. The clubhouse was filled beyond capacity. Residents wanted answers. They wanted accountability. One by one, board members resigned. Melissa Carter stood at the front of the room holding a prepared statement. Her hands shook slightly. She apologized for the decisions that had been made. She admitted the board had chosen short-term savings over long-term safety. No one applauded. No one accepted excuses. When she finished speaking, she quietly walked out of the building without looking back. That was the last time I ever saw her. Over the following months, construction crews worked every day inside Silver Creek Estates. Old drainage pipes were removed. New reinforced systems were installed. The retention pond was doubled in size. Every recommendation that had once been ignored was finally completed. Ironically, the final design looked remarkably similar to the engineering plans that had been sitting inside county files for years. Plans that should have been followed from the beginning. Life slowly returned to normal. Grass grew again across the valley. Families repaired their homes. Children played outside once more. The scars left by the floods slowly disappeared. Almost 1 year later, another powerful storm crossed the mountains. Meteorologists warned of record rainfall. News stations predicted widespread flooding. Many people feared the worst. I simply walked outside with a cup of coffee. Cooper sat beside me exactly where he had the year before. The rain became heavier. The creek rose once again. Water rushed across the valley. My flood wall stood exactly where it had always been. Strong, silent, reliable. Across the valley, the new drainage system carried water safely into the expanded retention pond. Storm drains remained clear. Roads stayed open. Not a single home flooded. This time, engineering defeated the storm. Exactly as it was supposed to. A few days later, one of the new HOA board members visited my ranch. He stood quietly looking at the flood wall. Then he smiled. "I owe you an apology." I shook his hand. "You don't owe me anything. You fixed the real problem." He nodded. "We spent years arguing about the wall, when we should have been listening to the engineer." Before leaving, he looked back one final time. "I hope people remember this." I smiled. "They will. Storms don't build character. They reveal it." As his truck disappeared down the road, I looked across the valley. The neighborhood was peaceful. The creek flowed quietly. Birds returned to the trees. Everything felt exactly the way I had imagined when I first bought the ranch. Peaceful. Safe. Simple. People often ask me if I regret building that flood wall. The answer is always the same. No. Because the wall was never built to prove anyone wrong. It was built to protect what mattered. Sometimes people laugh at preparation because they cannot see the danger. Until the danger arrives. In the end, water follows the laws of nature. Justice follows the facts. And both eventually find their own path.